Well, hello everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, good. We've got headphones out there and everything for the back row. Good. Okay, so my name is Pat Killianey. I'm with Audinate, and this presentation basically just talks about how Dante works with AES67 and SMPTE 2110, how you would use it in your installations. A couple of things that this is going to cover in general is some basic design principles that we suggest. So when you're putting together a system, how do we suggest you think about it? And more importantly, why did we choose to go that path? I also want to clarify, there's some misunderstandings about how we work with Precision Time Protocol version 2. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And we'll also give you sort of a basic overview of our AES67 and SMPTE 2110 implementation. Now, one of the things I will tell you for those of you who are watching this on the recording, as a prerequisite, it would help if you're not familiar with Dante Domain Manager. We have a video that we've put online. Dante Domain Manager is part of our SMPTE 2110 solution. So it's about a 17-minute video. The link is there, so you can get the presentation later, click on it and watch that. But for those of you that are here, we'll do it out of order. You can listen to me first and then go back and check that later, okay? So the first thing I want to go over is a little bit of history of audio networks, just to understand where we're at. The first commercially successful audio network is CobraNet, and that came out in 1996. Just to give you an idea how long ago that was before we had the App Store. The App Store came out in 2008 with the iPhone. Wasn't really a need for an App Store because there wasn't high-speed internet connections for people. You actually had to go down to the corner store and buy your software in cardboard boxes. And in 1996, you could get Office 97 on an installation on a CD-ROM, or because CD-ROMs weren't even that popular yet, you could also get it on an installation with 44 floppy disks. You would put in one at a time. That is how long audio networks have been in practice. So at the time, CobraNet was working on a 10 megabit Ethernet, but in 1998, they hit the 100 megabit mark, and that's the CobraNet that everybody came to know and love. EtherSound came along after that, around 2001. Basically, they kind of said CobraNet had a really good idea, but their latency was kind of high. We're going to work around that by avoiding the switch, because the switch did not have very good tools to deliver very low latency. And so basically the EtherSound system, the way you would think about it, it was a daisy chain of devices. After that, there was a period of network innovation. So that's about the time you would start seeing a maturity in systems like quality of service, precision time protocol, IGMP snooping, and other things. They became more common practice, and that allowed us to build networks the way we're using them today. The developers of Dante, before they built Dante, they were actually heavily involved in those open standards groups. And when they built Dante, Dante was built on all of those standards. So we believe in that very strongly. And that's what enabled us to get tremendous high channel count, very low latency, and of course we can scale with the network as you go. So if you have a 100 megabit connection, we can use that. Hopefully by now we're at least at a gigabit. We can use a 2 gigabit, a 10 gigabit, whatever you got. In 2009, the Audio Engineering Society put out a paper, and it was basically on the best practices for audio networks. And what they recognized was that there were several audio networks available at the time. Everybody was using uncompressed audio, right? PCM data. So if we wanted to make these work together, it shouldn't be too difficult because there was no codecs to worry about or anything like that. But as the second paragraph shows, in practice, there are several issues. There was no way to be able to talk between the two. The packets were formatted a little bit different. Conceptually, the way they deal with synchronization was different. So a new solution was needed if you wanted to be able to get through some of the systems of the time. And at the time, Livewire and Dante were on the market. They were listed in that report. WheatNet IP was around, but I think it probably just missed when they started that paper. So the solution that they developed was AES67, right? A couple years went by, development was done on it. In 2013, the first publication, and I'd say 2015 was another publication, and about the time, well actually not about the time, it was at this show in October 2015 that AES67 was demonstrated on a large scale for the first time. Now, when that was done, there was a group called the Media Networking Alliance that did most of basically their job was to educate the market on what AES67 was, how to use it, what it's all about. And if we look at the way they described AES67, they said AES67 enables audio over IP streaming interoperability, okay. But that last bit, they said it's not a new technology, it's a bridging compliance mode. And what they're trying to do here is they're trying to differentiate AES67 from Dante, Livewire, QLAN, Ravenna, WheatNet IP. And basically, if we look at a graph here, AES67 strictly dealt with the transport of media. It discussed discovery, but it didn't come to any conclusions on it. So AES67 was just getting data across a network. How do I get the stream started? Well, there's no patcher, right? So you had to go on one device, make a bunch of settings, go on the other device, make a bunch of settings, and so there was a little bit of sneaker net involved in getting that to go. And that was one of the things that was very different. So AES67 was a very manual process of getting things started, whereas Dante, Livewire, Ravenna, QLAN, all these different systems, they had their own methods of having devices discover each other, establish streams, deal with network security, and all of that. So as I look at this graph, it does a good job of differentiating AES67 from the other platforms, or the other network solutions. But the difference between the network solutions is disguised, right? QLAN is not a replacement for Livewire, is not a replacement for Ravenna, is not a replacement for Wheatstone, or WheatNet. Every one of those platforms addressed some of these higher level things in completely different ways, and their developers would have very deeply seated ideas on why they did that. If we tried to get agreement on how to deal with those higher levels, there probably would have been blood on the carpet if we had to get everybody to agree. And Aidan Williams basically said the AES67 only dealing with the transport and not dealing with the other things is not a failure of AES67. Basically, he said, by remaining pragmatic in scope, by narrowly focusing on the transport piece, AES67 was neither too weighty to get agreement from everybody, nor was it too complex to be implemented. Basically, by keeping it simple, everybody could come to an agreement on just enough to get it done and move forward. So AES67 is really something that you just want to use to communicate between systems, but you would still build your system on a particular solution. With SMPTE 2110, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the road map, the JTM Road Map, but this is the pyramid that they've put together, and basically what they're saying is, you know, the tip is the part that's done, and as we start going down the list, varying levels of completeness are there. I would say that one of the interesting things, if we look at this, the network solutions available today, especially Dante, we've solved all of these already today. But the fact that SMPTE 2110 is trying to go through those, we do plan on helping them, we plan on supporting them as they go through some of these. So again, let's get to the basic design principle here. Basically, if we have an engineer that's in charge of the stadium and they have a whole bunch of gear, what we usually say is take a circle, draw it around all their gear, keep that to one network solution. In this case, let's say it's Dante. And then we've got that remote truck out there, take all the gear they have, draw a circle around it, and keep it to a particular solution. Generally what happens is people tend to pick a product they like, and they find the product families they like, and whatever network solution that is on is the thing that people will go for. And that's kind of how these things get chosen. Now, when we need to connect these systems, traditionally what we've done in the past is we've just said, okay, I'm going to put an edge device that's speaking analog AES3 or MADI, something like that, and then that will be that common language. And so AES67 gives you another alternative to that. So AES67 should not be taking over your network solution. You'll be creating a lot more work for yourself because they don't do discovery, patch and control, all that kind of stuff. They don't deal with security, but neither does MADI, neither does AES3, right? So AES67 as a replacement for those things is fine, but not for your network solution. And by the way, a system like this, that could be a Ravenna truck, that could be a Livewire truck, it would still be the same thing. Could even be a Dante truck, right? It could be whatever you want, and you can go from there. One of the things that I like to point out, especially to the video world, is that SMPTE 2110 is an absolute revolution for video. There is no doubt about that. They're coming from an SDI environment where everything is point-to-point. SDI has a bandwidth cap. People are having a difficult time figuring out how to squeeze everything in there. And so SMPTE 2110, or I should say ST 2110, certainly feels liberating because you say, oh, I can buy network switches so I can send an uncompressed video stream. That's a breath of fresh air. And I also get the network flexibility. I can send anything anywhere I want. And I can do splits, and I can do all of this kind of stuff. So it's got a lot of excellent things going for it. But for audio, we've been doing audio networks since 1996, and I would say probably around 2010, somewhere around there, the uptake on it has expanded greatly. Networking isn't new for us. Uncompressed audio is not new for us. We've done that for a very long time. So SMPTE 2110 to us is really just an improved AES67, but it's still an interoperability system. So you're still going to take your systems and build it on a network solution for audio. You're still going to do something like Dante, Ravenna, Livewire, whatever, and SMPTE 2110 can be used to interface between those teams. Basically, again, each team has a simple set of utilities to use. There's a lot more automation in it. And then when we need to talk to the video world, we can speak 2110 to them. That's fantastic. And if you think about the production chain, this is something I've shown before, but basically the audio production world is the piece I'm talking about, right? That would be a network solution of some sort. We're going to speak to the video production team, which is probably going to be going to something like SMPTE 2110. 2110 can continue to carry the audio and video along the same path throughout the conformance stages, turnaround stages, everything on the delivery path. But interestingly, you could actually still do an intercom system, for instance, or a monitoring system, or a post-production room or something like that. That's probably still the right place for a network solution. For something like intercom, if you needed to be able to pick different sources, excuse me, if you needed to be able to pick different sources, one of the nice things about SMPTE 2110, and we'll get to this, but we can take an SDP file into Dante Domain Manager and we can start targeting it. So we can say, you have this huge network, but I'm going to be able to take everything and put it into a domain. So we can say, we have a control room over here. Here's the streams that you want to see, even though the entire network is one big, massive system. So we can say, I'm going to target that right here. You don't have to see everything. You're just going to see the pieces you need. You're not even authorized to touch anything else. That stuff is kind of nice. So if we think about it, SMPTE 2110 doesn't replace Dante, doesn't replace Ravenna, doesn't replace Livewire. They're really replacing the SDI, MADI, and AES3 interconnects that we've been putting between our systems for days. No more SDI embedder, de-embedder. The audio people deal with that once in a blue moon, and they usually take a deep breath, get ready to read the manual again, because I don't remember what the settings were again, and so yeah, that's kind of the experience. So we want to get away from that and get to a network solution that we're all familiar with that we can all run. And by the way, for those of you who, there are a number of people who are strong proponents of open standards, and sometimes they kind of say like, well, if you're using something like Dante, you're isolating yourself. And open standards, they don't do that. You can use anything you want, anywhere. Interestingly, that's not how they behave, though. If you start looking at something, there was a presentation done at IBC by the BBC on a system that they put in, and this is just common sense, but they kind of looked at it, they said, we want to use SMPTE 2110, fantastic. But they still stuck to families of products because they realized if I stick to a family of products, perhaps even a specific brand, there will be another layer of control on top of it that we'll be able to benefit from. So for instance, all of the switches are Cisco in that facility. There's no HP, There's no Brocade. There's nothing like that. It's all Cisco. When you get to the video, it's all Grass Valley, right? And by the way, that makes sense. That's basically the same thing we're saying. By sticking to a network solution, by sticking to a family of products, you're going to get an extended feature set. And as far as isolating yourself, every audio network solution that I can think of supports their native solution and open standards at the same time. Okay, so you never lock yourself out. We can receive Dante streams and AES67 at the same time while we're transmitting Dante streams and AES67 at the same time. As we came along with SMPTE 2110, same thing. We can send and receive open standards and our solution at the same time. And by the way, I know that's true of Dante, that's true of Ravenna, that's true of Livewire, that's true all the way around the board. When the Media Networking Alliance did the demonstrations of AES67, we even set it up that way where we had 4 different racks. Each system was speaking their native solution inside the rack, and then when we went to another solution, that was the AES67 standard. So anyway, so using a network solution doesn't isolate you in any way. Another thing I wanted to talk about was Precision Time Protocol version 2. I think there's some confusion on this one. Does Dante support PTP version 2? Yes, absolutely we do. Now the confusion comes in because, for a few reasons. Number one, Precision Time Protocol version 1 came out in 2002. Development of Dante was from about 2003 to 2006. So of course it references PTP version 1. PTP version 2 came out 2 years later, and then all the open standards referenced version 2. So I'm going to show you how we do that, how we handle that. But obviously, if you look at the systems available on the market today, Roland Hemming did a study just how many devices are out there. If 3/4 of the AES67 devices out there come from the Dante platform, I think it's pretty important that we get this Precision Time Protocol thing worked out. So here's the basic idea. So we've got a grandmaster, and it's going to feed clock to all your devices, right? Very simple in a single master situation. If things get a little bit more spread out, sometimes what people do is they'll say, I'm going to establish a boundary clock. And what's going to happen is, there we go. The grandmaster is going to synchronize a certain number of devices. This boundary clock device here in the middle, oftentimes the network switch, will synchronize to that grandmaster, and then it will synchronize. Oh, what happened there? Oh. PowerPoint's going funny on me. Timeout. That's not what's in the slide. Let me try it again. Okay, yeah, oh, that's weird. Now it's working. Okay, so the grandmaster is going to synchronize the devices that it's talking to directly. The boundary clock is saying, okay, grandmaster, I'm going to synchronize my watch with you. And then, downstream, it will say, okay, hey, all of you devices in my clocking domain here, I'm going to be your clock now. And it's going to redistribute the clock and so on, and you can keep growing your system that way. So with Dante, we do kind of the same thing. Basically what we do is we say, if you have a Dante device, if you turn on AES67 or turn on SMPTE 2110 compatibility, the device is going to look for a PTP version 2 clock. In the AES67 mode, it uses the automatic clock collection process in Precision Time Protocol version 2. In the SMPTE time code. In the SD2110 mode, it will let you manually choose which clock you'd like to use. So our first device here, basically the Dante devices with open standards engaged, they will follow the PTP version 2 master. From there, all of the Dante devices will recognize each other and say, you know what? We've got some other devices that either don't have the open standard engaged, or Maybe I'm a device that's too old, the chipset couldn't support it. So what will happen is those devices all elect a clock master amongst themselves. One of those PTP version 2 devices will become a boundary clock, and it will use PTP version 1. Oh, this computer is totally messing up. There we go. Okay, I don't know why it keeps showing one slide over the other. So the Grandmaster is synchronizing the PTP version 2 devices. One of those becomes a boundary clock for all of the other devices, and so it goes. So it works the same way that you've been doing with Precision Time Protocol version 2 boundary clocks going down the way. I have heard some people say that you can't have PTP version 1 and version 2 on the network at the same time. I will tell you that if you look in the Precision Time Protocol version 2 specification, right in the standard, it's actually section 10. It actually says the two have to be allowed to be on the network at the same time. It has to. It's in the spec. So, and it goes through a set of behaviors that are frankly rather common sense on how to be able to do that. So if ever you have a problem with that, somebody did something non-standard on the network, and that would need to be resolved. But anyway, so this is the way that it gets done. It's fairly simple. And I think, so number one, I think some people didn't realize that you could have both systems on the network because they didn't realize a boundary clock could receive version 2 and transmit version 1. The other part is something we'll talk about here. So we have two modes now that we have our SMPTE 2110 option. You say, I want to use Dante and AES67, or I want to use Dante and SMPTE 2110. You pick one way or the other. Now, the two formats are compatible with each other. This isn't a format war. Really, this is a question of how you want to work. And by the way, when I say the two are compatible with each other, the SMPTE 2110 mode is available in our 4.2 firmware. And in the 4.2 firmware, we made our AES67 mode use this SMPTE 2110 time offset. So they are completely compatible now. That was not true before. Okay, but the question is, how do you want to work in choosing your mode? AES67 is a very simple mode. It's very lightweight. If you're setting up a system and you say, oh, all of a sudden I need to make an open standards connection, AES67 would probably be the way to do it. If you want to do SMPTE 2110, that's a larger network where you're doing a large deployment. That will give you a lot more control. That'll give you all the features of Dante Domain Manager because it is required for 2110. But anyway, so we'll talk about that in a little bit here. So let's talk about how AES67 works, just as a reminder. You basically go into the device, you're going to turn on AES67 mode. You're going to choose what channels you want in the stream here in the bottom. And then one of the new features that we've put in here, before you had to, it would automatically generate a multicast stream at a multicast address that it chose. We now give you the ability to determine that one yourself. So if you want to intervene and say, I need it on a specific address, you can do it. But either way, the stream is made. There's a fixed SDP profile that we're going to use. And then we automatically make an SAP announcement so that other devices can discover it and pull it in. For us to be able to accept an AES67 stream from anybody else, we're going to need an SAP announcement. Now, many devices offer that. If you have a particular device that doesn't offer an SAP announcement, you'll need a utility to generate one. Yeah, that's just a close-up of the ability to manually choose your multicast address. Now, as I said, with SMPTE 2110, Domain Manager is required on this version. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to give you the ability to make some settings and push it out to all devices so you don't have to go one at a time. We'll show you the power of central management here in just a moment. How much manual control do you get? Quite a bit. This is just the Precision Time Protocol settings that you can get into. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble or a lot of good, depending on how you do it. But anyway, so like I said, you'll be able to do all that. SMPTE 2110, let's see. Okay, well these are just basically the standards that we're using inside there, so it's all the things that were defined in 2110. One interesting thing is SMPTE 2110 also gives us redundancy. So Dante has had redundancy, I don't know, probably since 2008 or so. So this gives us an open standard redundancy as well. AES67 never addressed it, so you use SMPTE 2110, you're going to get that option. But as I was saying, so what you can do with SMPTE 2110, you go into Dante Domain Manager, you make the settings that you want for one of your groups of devices, and you say, here's what I want, and it will automatically push those settings to all of those devices. You don't have to do it individually. It's going to save a lot of typo errors or something like that. So that's going to be pretty handy. You'll be able to do it for clocking. You'll be able to do it for the SDP profile changes you want to make. It will go to all of those devices and they will be generated in that manner. Since we have redundancy, when you're using SMPTE 2110, you will be able to determine the manual addresses on both networks there. That's not a problem. And in SMPTE 2110, we use SMPTE audio levels A, B, and C. So it's basically a thing. So A and B are both 1 through 8 channels, but there's a packet time difference. And level C gets you up to 64 channels within the flow. So that's kind of the basic idea between AES67 and 2110. If you just have to come up with something ad hoc, that's your AES67 version. If you want the manual configuration, that's your 2110. Last thing I want to talk about a little bit is latency. And this is just, it's not a terribly big deal, but in Dante, when we say latency, open standards are usually meaning something different. So this is just another little clarity point. Open standards, when they talk about latency, they're usually talking about packet time. So because audio is such a small amount of data, what we usually do is we take multiple channels and multiple samples of it, just spool it up and put it in a packet that we're going to send out on the network together. So packet time is how long are we waiting before we put that packet out on the network. So if it's 0.125 milliseconds, we're waiting 1.125 milliseconds before we put it out on the network. It's not 0.125 milliseconds until playout time, right? That's a whole nother thing, because you still have to get the packet across the network. There's got to be some variation for packet delivery across the network, and then the device on the other end has to be able to reassemble it. In Dante, when we say latency, we're not talking about packet time. We're talking about your playout time. So we automatically work everything backwards to figure out what the packet time will need to be. So it's just something to be aware of. If you're working on a Dante device, there's Dante latency, there's open standards latency, and the two are not the same. And for some people, there has been the question, Dante devices previously, we could send and receive open standards, but we couldn't send it open standard from a Dante device to a Dante device. Latency was part of the reason why, because the latency rules were now going to be different between these two different streams. If you were expecting these to be phase coherent at the other side, you might be disappointed. So we basically turned that feature off so that somebody couldn't accidentally create a phase problem that way. Since then, people came back to us and they said, thanks for doing all that work to protect us from ourselves, but there are occasions when we want it to work that way. So the SMPTE 2110 version or the AES67 version, if you're using Dante Domain Manager, you can basically grab the SDP profile for a stream and have it rebroadcast it, and you will be able to use that now if you wish. So it's not an automatic thing. We're still trying to protect you from doing it accidentally. I think that's the sensible thing. But it's a manual process, and it's not a difficult one. You just literally copy it, paste it back in, say where you want it to show up, and that's it. So, quick wrap up. Obviously, audio networks have been around a long time. The AES67 standard originally came around. It's basically an interoperability system. SMPTE 2110 is in that boat as well. They have some improvements with NMOS and things like that. But all of that is coming along. When you're designing a system, in our opinion, you still need to be designing on a audio network solution, and then you'll use the open standards to communicate between teams. If you do have some random piece that you've just got to have in your system and it's got to be an open standard connection, you can certainly do it, but as a guideline, stick to a network solution. Your life will be a lot easier. And then, of course, so the SMPTE 2110 will give us a link with the video team as well. When you're using open standards, there's the AES67 Mode in SMPTE 2110. It's really a matter of do you want the automatic approach, more of an ad hoc thing, or if you have a large deployment, you really need the manual configuration. You're just choosing a mode on how you want to work with that, how much control you want. And the control is quite deep. So that is what I've got for you. If you have any questions, I think our time is about up here, but come on up and ask me anything you want. Thank you very much.